Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of Talks with V. We're so happy to be here with you guys tonight, and we're presented to you by the HBCU Lounge Network. And this topic that we'll be discussing is therapy. Hello, Kay. Welcome, everyone. And so this evening, we're going to be discussing therapy. And so I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that before I introduce our guest. And so throughout our lives, we have many experiences that shape us. In some cases, we don't fully process those experiences. And that affects the type of relationships that we have currently and will have in the future if it's undealt with. And so tonight we have two guests. Right now we'll have one that's running a little bit late and he'll be joining us a little later. But first I would like to go ahead and introduce Miss Rabiia Ali, who is the LMFT. And
Hello.
hi, hello, welcome. I'm so happy to see you today and that you're joining us. And I would like you to tell, our audience, what is it that you do? What does LMFT stand for?
Okay, so LMFT is licensed marriage and family therapist.
Okay.
So my specialty with within that scope is doing therapy with couples, children, families, and individuals.
Okay. So you cover it all.
It all, yeah. But it's mostly based on relationships. So there's a bunch of different types of therapists. So the
Mhm.
LMFT is specializing in relationships and how relationships are related to life or how life is related within your relationships and kind of helps people discover those types of things.
Nice, 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 nice. And so I know that you do still cover, you're also sex therapist as well. And so what made you get into all of this, decide to go into this field?
Well, no, I'm not a certified sex therapist, so
Okay.
let's
Okay.
let me put that out there. I'm
Okay.
not
Okay.
certified in it, but I do have a lot of experience with it. So
Hmm.
there's actually two things that brought me to therapy
Uh-huh.
in general. So the first
Okay.
thing is I'm a Black woman with a dysfunctional family, right? Which I didn't actually know that my
Okay.
family was dysfunctional until I went to therapy, right? So
Okay.
black black woman dysfunctional family. So the second thing that got me wanting to do therapy is because I started this girls group when I was with like in 2010 2011 because my
Hmm.
daughter was of age and she was getting to a place where she didn't have a whole lot of role models, like positive role models. I didn't see anything in the neighborhood, so I was like, okay, let me start this because I'm gonna let me start this type of person,
Yeah,
right? So I was like,
definitely.
let me just do this because there's nothing, right? And so all of the girls that were in there had sexual trauma. And
Mm.
I would say it probably I had two cohorts, and so both of them was about 13 or 14 girls. So 13 out of the 14 would have sexual trauma. And at that
Mm.
time I was like, I can't do anything to help these girls. Like I don't know anything about this. I'm just a mom, right? I'm just somebody
Right.
that I may have had experiences or I knew people with experiences, but
Right.
I wasn't somebody who could help them through their
Mm.
experience. And so I was like,
Right.
okay, let me go back to school and let me go to grad school and do therapy, do as a therapist, and then try to
Mhm.
figure out how to help these girls. But then
Right.
my life took a different trajectory, and so I'm not currently doing that. But it came kind of full circle because
Right.
now I'm capable or able to be able to do those types of things.
Right. Now you've acquired those skills that you can apply, into that area because, you know, therapy, I mean, it's a broad thing, and I'm sure that
Yes.
a lot of the tools and skills that you gain through that education and experience and research, you're able to apply it
Yes.
in so many different areas of life. So
Hmm.
that's awesome. And I'm thankful that you're out there doing it because someone's got to do it, and we all
Yes,
have our
ma'am.
different paths. And
Hmm.
those who are equipped, and have the patience and the
Yes.
interest, they should be, doing it. So
Takes
appreciate
a
it.
lot of patience, lot of patience. Yes.
Definitely, definitely. Okay, so well, I want to go ahead and jump into our questions. And so what I hear a lot of times with therapy, I think that with the women, I'll hear more women being open to therapy, but there are some that are resistant to it. But I hear a lot of our men that are like, no.
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, so I wonder what, these reasons, that are keeping them, from wanting to get involved with therapy. But that is one of our questions. But first, I would like to start with what is your style in your approach to therapy?
My style, and I think we talked about this when we talked on the phone, but my style is like
Mhm.
very unconventional, right? I don't
Okay.
necessarily think in terms of this is how therapy goes, because
Hmm.
specifically because the therapy
Right.
that we learn is not the therapy that's for us, right? And I
Hmm.
say us meaning our community, the Black
Right.
community. It's not our
Okay.
therapy. So I have tailored the therapy that I learned and all the techniques that I learned in school and in grad school. And even
Hmm.
when I was doing my, my practicum and things after that, I tailored it to our community. So I use
Right.
my personal experiences or personal experiences from people that I know around me. And then I structure whatever the therapy is with the person that's in front of me. Right. Because we hear
Mm.
this all the time about Black people are not a monolith. Okay. We're not a monolith, but we do have a lot of similarities, right? We
Right.
do have a lot of groupthink, which is not necessarily a
Hmm.
good thing, but we do have a
Hmm.
lot of groupthink where everybody, if we're not thinking like the group, then we're outcasted or we're not thinking the same. So when you're talking about
Right.
like men who don't want to engage in therapy, it's because they've learned therapy is not for them, right? Therapy
Mm.
is emotions is a woman thing. Emotions or
Hmm.
dealing with emotions is something that women do. So why would they want to have to sit in front of somebody and be vulnerable and be emotional when they don't think that that's something that they have to deal with?
Right, right, right. And so, as far as the way that you're approaching therapy and your style is more like, okay, case by case, I'm customizing this for you because, right, we're all different. So,
Right,
uh, and I know, like, I can't do the same thing with this person that I do with
right.
this other person because they need different things.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, we kind of do a disservice to generalize or just lump us all together and say, okay, we're going to do this across the board. It's
Right.
like for some things that
Yes.
can
But
work. Right?
that's what happens when we have therapists who don't look like us, right? Because this
Mhm,
is how I'm just going to use the term these people. This is how those
mhm,
people act. And so this is how I'm
mhm,
going to treat them, even
mhm.
though it might not necessarily be at all that. They might have grown up in a different type of neighborhood or might have had
Right.
different experiences going to school or whatever. And so
Mhm.
having a boilerplate across the board approach doesn't work for people. And if
Right.
people oftentimes go to therapy for years and have no
Mhm.
idea why until they get to someone that actually is for them, why they haven't
Exactly.
gotten any change or nothing has happened yet.
Exactly, exactly. And that's kind of hard because you're told like, okay, this could work for you, but you also need to know like a little bit about yourself so that you know what's going to work for you, or at least kind
Right.
of have some type of understanding about how do I need to go about this in approaching one, in
Hmm.
approaching one. And I think that if folks can just hear more about different therapists' style,
Hmm.
um, then they can say, oh, okay, I think that this might be a person that will work with me. Like this might be the type of therapist I need.
Right.
So that's awesome. So that's awesome. And so we're going to go into the what scares people. I have noticed that there are some people who are absolutely terrified, and it's like an obvious avoidance, like
Yeah.
that they do not, want this therapy. And I'm just like, do they think something's gonna happen? Like that they can't come back from. I'm like, you're already kind of
Yeah.
in a bad situation. You know, it could only get better. Type of
Right.
thing.
Right.
So, but what would you say that maybe in general, because there are some folks who are scared of therapy, men and and women. So would you say that there are different things that scare men about therapy versus women?
I won't say different. I'll
Okay.
say there's a variety of things,
Hmm.
right? And the main thing I think for everybody, and not just men versus women, but for everybody who decides that they want to seek therapy, I think the main thing that scares them is in being in a room with yourself.
Right.
Because you have to deal with yourself. You have to deal with your emotions. You got to deal with what has happened in your life. You have to bring up all of this stuff that you don't want to necessarily touch on during the day or day to day. Right. And so now you're sitting in front of this person who you have no idea who they are. You have no idea what their thoughts are. And now you have to disclose this information or be vulnerable in this way. And it's really in dealing with yourself. Right. When I see their clients, I tell them all the time in the beginning, and this is one thing that I notice even as a consumer of therapy that therapists don't do. They don't tell you how hard it is. Right. So I tell people, listen, this is something you have to be ready for. If you are not ready to do this, then, or even make an assessment to see if you are ready to do this, because this is one of the hardest things that you're probably ever going to have to do, especially when you're dealing with trauma. Right.
Just face those things.
You have to face you. It's not even just it. You have to face you. The you that you've been escaping, or the you that you've been trying to get away from, or the you that you've been drinking away or smoking away. You got to deal with it. Or whatever, right? You have to deal with it. And you got to deal with it 1 hour a week in front of this person who is going to try to help you get through it. But if you're not ready for that, meaning I'm not ready to deal with my demons, or I'm not ready to deal with my mom, or I'm not ready to deal with my family, then therapy is not something that you're going to be able to do.
Well, that's, I mean, and you make a great point, because those are things that I wonder sometimes is, is it, some people ask the question, well, is it for everyone? And then before I was thinking, yeah, of course it is, because it's going to help. But to your point, you do have to be ready. And then there is a lot of things that happen and unfold that you're not expecting. Like, for instance, I know that, as I've been doing my work and digging in, to see what are those things, those triggers, why are they triggers? Where does this come from? And you start looking inward and see things about yourself that you're not, maybe what you thought you were, you're not as good as what you thought, you were. And as you go inward and are seeing these, actually allowing yourself to see you, it is scary. And sometimes I think that part can be, terrifying. And so I'm so glad that you have brought that up, because I know that when I was looking, I was just like, I don't want to look no more. Like, we need a break. We'll come back to this next year, because it was hard. It was hard because we have these ideas. And I think for so long, we talked about this last show about having that need to please, or the disease to please. And just depending on what kind of person you are, you do want people to see the best version of yourself. So that's just, I think that's normal, that people want others to view them a certain way. And I don't know, maybe I think we hold on to it so tight because we know that we can't always defend that 24 hours out of the day, and you can't keep that perfection, thing going all day. And if there's something that you do, and this person goes home, and they're thinking more about it, you can't be right there with them and explain, oh no, that's not what I meant by it, so it's hard and it's heavy, and I think we have to kind of like give that away, you know what I mean? Like, let some of that go.
I mean, the thing with going to therapy that is difficult for some people is that you develop this identity your entire life, right? This is who I know that I am. This is who I think that I am. When you get to therapy, all that goes away. Like you literally lose the person who you thought you were. And so that's difficult for some people, because I know how to deal with this person. I know how to deal with this person's ways, and I know how to deal with all the stuff that comes with this.
You're like, I've been with them for a while.
I've been with them for my entire life, right? This is how I know how to be. And so when you go and you see somebody and they're saying, oh no, that's not okay. And now you're like, oh, wait a minute. So now what do I do? Because now I don't know who I am anymore. Now I have to figure out who it is that I am and what my identity is. And the other thing is, when you go to therapy, a lot of people around you don't go to therapy. Right? They don't have the tools and the techniques. Right. So it's like 95% of the population that you are around has no idea about any of these things that you're learning. So if you are somebody that is like a people pleaser, or you're somebody who likes to be a part of the crowd or a part of the group, therapy for you is going to be hard, because you have to be an individual in these sessions, or you have to be by yourself and figure out your identity as in relation to everybody else that's around you. But you can't expect other people to change when you're changing.
Right. Or and also too, you have to want it bad enough, because like I'm totally that way, but I want it bad enough to be better because I'm so passionate about people, and I know that, like, I know this. It only in my mind, the common sense is you can't really do too much, for other people if you are not where you need to be, if you're not together.
You can't.
If you're right here on the verge, 90% of the time of at the edge of the cliff, you ain't got nothing for nobody, right?
You gonna fall.
You can't afford any extra time to go anywhere else. You need to be focusing on you and getting better. And so you definitely have to want it bad enough, and you got to love yourself more than you do making other people happy.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because, you deserve that. And I think that there's many of us, especially within our community, who don't value others, but we don't value ourselves. And so we don't do those things enough. A lot of us speak about self-love, and I don't think that many know what that really means. Like it's more than, pampering. It's more than going to a shopping, women's conference, or, and I don't even know if men are, because they're not vocalizing that all the time about self-love. You hear us talking about it. So it's kind of scary, because you're just like, I wonder if men are getting self-love. You know what I mean? If they know, if they even, think that it's okay for them to think about themselves in that way.
I always say this thing about what therapy is and what therapy isn't, right? And somebody had made a comment that I saw that just stuck to me, about the fact that therapy right now is trendy, right? It's a thing that people say it's a fad, and it's fashionable, is what she said. And it's sad, because people are not getting to the root of their problems, because they feel like just because you can say I'm going to therapy, that means that that's it, right? And I always tell clients, therapy is not, this is what therapy is, and this is what therapy is not. Therapy is not the fix, right? Therapy is not the healing. Therapy is not how you're going to be able to figure out all the things that are going on with you to be able to get to this place. Therapy is the vehicle to get you to healing, right? Therapy is the vehicle to be able to get you to your identity. Therapy is the vehicle to be able to get you to the root of the problem.
Right.
It depends on how much work you put in, on how much result and outcome you get. Right. If you're not putting in the work, and you're not doing the things outside of therapy, and you're not changing your behavior, and you're not changing your thoughts and all the things that go with it, it's not going to work for you. You can go to therapy for years and years and years, and you might get to this one person who says, you know what, this is what we should focus on, and that'll open up everything for you.
Right. It's like that aha moment,
Right.
And it's so funny, because I was watching something. One of my shows that I used to watch, and I think, Ray Donovan. We're going to throw that out there. And so they made a movie about it, but I was just listening. That show has a lot to do with childhood family trauma, right? And it was either, I think the therapist was saying that trauma is it's a tricky thing. He said the younger that you experience, the more, and then you don't deal with it, the more it takes from you. And I was like, oh, because when you look at different people's experiences, and you hear from them, and they share their different testimonies or things that they've gone through, it's just like, wow, like you lose a lot of yourself if you don't say, okay, enough is enough. I have to make a change. I need to get whatever it is that I need that's going to change the direction that I'm going. And so. Yeah, it's a heavy thing.
Good thing you brought up trauma, because there's there's this idea that trauma is also trendy, right? I know my trauma,
Yes.
and I have
Yes.
trauma, and I'm going through trauma. This is also a trendy thing. And
Mhm.
it bothers me specifically with the fact that a lot of celebrities are getting on the $1 million bandwagon with regard to trauma and mental health and all of that stuff. And I got attacked on Facebook one day when I made a comment, but we'll talk about that later. Anyway, trauma is trendy, but the thing that people don't understand about trauma is not a thing, right? Trauma is about emotions. And if you are a person specifically like with men, if you're a person who doesn't think you have emotions, you're not ever going to want to deal with your trauma, right? You're never going to want to deal with it because I don't feel.
Oh, wow.
So, you know what I mean? I don't feel, so I don't have to deal with that. But the thing is, trauma is not in your mind. Trauma is in your body. And trauma is in reactions to things and events that have happened to you in the past. If it's past yesterday or if it's past 20 years ago.
Right.
You can be traumatized by something that other people might think is minuscule or minor, like, you know, some type of phobia, right? Or you could be traumatized by a sexual violation. The thing about it is that you attach meaning to whatever happened to you.
Right.
And oftentimes it becomes traumatic because you're thinking about it with the brain that you have now instead of the brain that you had then, right? Because back then, no, it was not okay, but it might not have been as traumatizing for you if you were thinking about it back then. So a lot of times with trauma therapy, therapists use going back and, you know, dealing with your inner child and dealing with you as a child, because that's the brain that you were thinking about when this happened, when this thing happened. What happens is you carry it into adulthood in your body.
What do they say? And trauma informed coaching certifications are being sold like candy.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That is the truth, and that's the part that is frustrating. And I'm sure it's very frustrating for you because you do this thing,
yes,
you know, like you do this thing, and it's very frustrating because it's just like it becomes real, like what is it, cliche, you know, where they just throw it around, and I hate that. It's just like when I'm in different rooms and there's discussions and someone says something powerful and then someone else wants to jump in and talk about something else. And I'm like, no, let that thing sit for a minute. You know, like I know that we're used to hearing the word trauma, and I know that we're used to hearing about certain experiences that people have, but the impact of it, you know, that the impact, this is enough to shift this person's whole life, honestly, their whole bloodline, you know, if you're not careful, you know what I mean?
Yes.
You know, when we think about generational curses and things like that. So it's like, no, we don't need to just kind of sweep that under the rug. And that is something that in our community we're good for, you know, is sweeping something under the rug. And saying that you'll get through it. But to your point in which you were saying is that your mind when you were going through it versus your mind now. And when a lot of times when you're going through it, you don't know that you're having a traumatic experience.
Oh, absolutely not. Because it's not traumatic then. It's traumatic now. Right? You carry the emotional connection or the attachment or whatever meaning you attach to it into your adult life, which is how it becomes trauma. But Black people are born with trauma.
Yeah.
We are born into a country and into a system that is traumatic for us. So it's not like you can get away from it, but at the same time, it's difficult to put a face and a name to what is happening or the reaction that you're having. Because like you said, most of the time, you're not even mentally aware that that's what you're doing. Right. It's a reaction in your body that's saying, this is dangerous coming. How do we usually respond? Right? If we usually respond in this way, this is what we're going to do today because this is what I'm seeing. It's not, it's a feeling. It's in generations and generations of it. And that's the thing, what we were talking about earlier about groupthink, right? We all have similar experiences because we have all been taught the same way to do things.
Right. Gloria, she said, she's like, I want our community to throw it away.
Throw it away. I agree. Throw it all away because we're taught similar things. And the problem is we're not all the same, right? We have different traditions. We have different lifestyles. We have different family styles. We have different cultures and customs within our community, right? We're not all the same, but we all think if we don't think like this, then we're going to be outside of the group. And that's the thing that's really the problem that's holding people to certain ideas like, misogyny or, the ways that we think about sex or the way that we talk about even pedophilia, right? Because we have these ideas that somebody that's down the street that looks like us said, this is what you are not supposed to do. Right. So we hold on to that for our entire life. And we're like, oh, this is what you're not supposed to do. And then we tell other people, this is what you're not supposed to do. But that's not necessarily the reality that's in front of you.
Right. That's very true. That is very true. Let me see what some of these questions in the comments. We're talking, okay, so men are taught to ignore our emotional problems and feelings. And that is something that is very interesting because the way that we think, is so different. And so I feel like that creates a breakdown as well, that we're not able to help each other, as partners, because that's what we are, men and women, we're partners, and we contribute different things. And so when we have such very different, thinking and mindset, and we come into something, it's just like we're not able to be in harmony because we're thinking so different, and then we allow that to hinder us from saying, okay, let me try and hear you or try and understand what, you're speaking of. But when I hear this thing about being emotional, it's like, emotions are many things. They're not just being feminine and crying or something like that, anger is an emotion. You know what I mean? And
I say that all the time.
It's anger an emotion, you know what I mean? And we both experience anger. And I should have had a list of emotions. What things are emotions? And I promise I don't have them, pulled up, but I'm almost sure that we both, men and women, experience all those different emotions.
We all experience that, yes. But the thing that, like we were talking about socialization, how we're socialized when we're younger. Young Black boys are socialized to be the only emotions that will be acceptable for them is aggression and anger. That's the only ones that people allow them to have, right? Because if they're crying, somebody in their family or somebody around them is saying stop. If they're if they're emoting in some way, somebody in their family or somebody around them is saying stop. Whereas little girls are socialized to be different. We're socialized to be compassionate. We're socialized to be nurturing. We're socialized to take care of, right? We're socialized to have emotional feelings and be emotional and emote all over the place because that's what girls do. Right? Girls are soft in that way because masculine and feminine energy, everybody has it, but men have more masculine, women have more feminine. But everybody has both. But we're not allowed to express both when we're growing up. I'm saying specifically for us in our community, it's like that from what I've seen. I don't know very many families who don't teach their children like that, but it happens quite often with us.
Right. And then, maybe we need to explore that concept of balance on a regular. That needs to be normal. But absolutely. I want to go ahead and introduce Mr. Felipe, Kristopher Blue. Welcome. We're so glad that you got to join us. Sorry about the delays. I know that was tough for you today, but we're glad that you made it. And I think that you're muted, so you might want to unmute. I believe you're muted. And so as he figures that out, you're muted. You're on mute.
Microphone check.
There we go. Yeah. Yes. So welcome. I'm going to go ahead and let you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do, your title, and you can even share with your years of experience. And then we'll let you go ahead and jump in with the questions that we've been discussing.
Yes, I'm Felipe Blue. I'm a graduate of Webster University in clinical mental health counseling. I'm currently a licensed clinical addiction specialist in Durham, Carolina. I have a nonprofit called More Than Therapy where I do private practice, but I mainly support clinicians in the helping field so that they don't burn out. And really focused on addictions and trauma, and mainly trauma in adolescence as it pertains to the things they experience in their communities.
Nice. Thank you. And we need that. After, reviewing your website and just, seeing a little bit more about you and there was something that I seen on there, and it was you what is it? You're the embodiment of Ubuntu. And so I had a little
Ubuntu,
joke, but
I
I didn't
am
know.
because we are. So I have to make sure I have the right people in my circle and the right people around me at any given time so that I can be the best me and they can be the best who they are.
I like that. I like that. Okay. Well, welcome. I had a little joke too, but I was like, I don't know if it's going to work because I didn't know enough about it. But I really love that. I love what it is that you're doing. And we were talking about, a lot of the differences between, men and women as it, pertains to therapy and things like that. And so it's awesome that your organization is, empowering men, to get that, therapy and put their mental health first. So kudos, to you and your team for sure. And so I'll go into, the first question for you. And that's, what is your style and approach to therapy?
My approach to therapy is really just person-centered, meet the people where they're at. I do what they call community-based therapy. So I don't typically meet in my office space. I meet them at their home or somewhere in the community. Therefore, you can see the things that impact them. You can have a more relative field, and the power dynamic that a desk presents is removed. It allows me to really get to the nitty-gritty of what needs to be done and how to do it, because in the office, even as myself as a therapist who sees a therapist, in an office setting, I don't tell her all my stuff. But if we were home on my couch, I might.
That's interesting. I never even thought about that, is being in someone's office versus being at home, even though we do know you're more comfortable at home or in the places that you frequent. You're bound to let your hair down a little bit more because everything is familiar around you versus
Right.
like, okay, I'm in a new space. I need to be conscious of my surroundings, and then I'm over analyzing the person who's analyzing me. So that you make such a great point, with that. And we also discussed what scares people or terrifies them. So many cases, there are women and men who are like, they're petrified of therapy, and then they will voice it aggressively sometimes, like, no, I don't need therapy. Why do I need someone telling me this is that, about myself? I don't need therapy. And so many people are curious who actually, are advocates of therapy. Why are so many others against it? You're on mute.
A lot of people that come into my practice is due to being referred by DSS or referred through Department of Corrections or something like that. They tell me a history of when they were younger in which they were abused by the system, sometimes abused by the system, by some of the declarations they make, and that they don't want to go to therapy because of that cycle of what they might have deemed as abuse, whether it be sexual, physical, or emotional. And with that, they might be hesitant, but since they were court ordered or forced into it by a legal system or DSS or something, then they have to participate. And when these things come out, it's deplorable how the system over the years has, impacted these people, or at least in their mind, how it impacted them, as they may have distortions or cognition skewed regarding their experience. But I don't take that from them. You meet them where they're at. You don't discount what they see or what they feel, because their reality is theirs.
That's so true. And I love the fact that, with Rabiia and yourself, it's like you're giving a different perspective, but similar, and that I think is the point of having, different options for, therapists. Just like I think that there's different options for professors and pastors. You contribute something different. There may be a person that I'm like, oh, they are not my flavor. That's not my flavor. I don't want to hear from this person, but this person over here, something about them gets me, you know what I mean? And you
Right.
never know that, like, as you do your work, you guys are doing your work because you're passionate about it. But there's someone that is just like, if it wasn't for, Felipe, if it wasn't for Rabiia, I couldn't get through it, like some God sent them, or whatever it is that you believe in, you like divine intervention. They came into my life and caught me right before, I was just like gonna give up. And so I just think that that's such a beautiful, thing. And definitely feel like you all should be showcased more so people can see like they're human, they're like me, they're like real, they have had experiences. And I appreciate the fact that Felipe, that you brought up that you're a therapist and you see a therapist, because a lot of people don't know that therapists see a therapist too, so that they can keep themselves together after you have, threw up on them what I always say, emotional vomit and every other thing that's going on with you. Once they give it to you guys, you got to do something with that, right?
Yeah, you have to. You have to. If there's a therapist that doesn't seek therapy, something's wrong.
Yeah.
So then it's wrong.
I might think that there might be a narcissist or something, because they're like, get to what is it? Think too much of themselves, in that time.
Right. If it's not good enough for the therapist to get, then why would it be good enough for the client, right? Exactly. Are we not equals in the world, or in the mind, or supposed to be anyway, regardless of the power dynamic? You are and I am. We are all humans.
Yeah. That's good.
I want to kind of piggyback on that if I can.
Go for it. Yes, come on.
One thing that people need to understand about therapy is that this person works for you, right? If you're not comfortable and you don't feel like they are doing what they need to do for you, you should seek someone else that is more comfortable for you. Because this is your therapy. This is you in this room talking to this person. This is not about what they want. This is not about what they need. This is not about how, and like what Felipe was said, meeting people where they are and not telling people that their reality is not right. Right? This is about you. And if you are not comfortable, you don't think that this person is working for you, you don't think that this person is telling you what you want to hear after you've told them all these different things that you prefer or you like, and they're still not doing it, then it's for you to say, okay, well, this person doesn't work. Let me go find somebody else. And you hopping from therapist to therapist doesn't mean something's wrong with you. It means you just haven't found a good fit.
You got to find the right one. Right. You really do. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I think too that people have to keep in mind, because when they say, okay, I don't need a therapist, but then they're calling their friends, at wee hours in the morning, and they're, I say burdening, because it is sometimes a burden and sometimes it's not one, but their family members, like they are basically thinking they're getting therapy, but they're weighing other people down who may not even be equipped, to handle it. I was listening to something and they were talking about a young lady. She had experienced like sexual trauma, but in sharing her experience with her sister, but then holding her hostage, like, no, do not share this with other people. The sister was going through like this indirect trauma. She hadn't experienced the sexual trauma, but her sister did. And that pain of the fact to know that her sister experienced this and that they're not getting any real help, therefore she's now been traumatized as well, and has some things that she has to work through. It's not only just the sister, but now, the person who experienced it physically, but, her sister as well. And that's not fair. You know what I mean? It's not fair to do that, but that goes and, leads us into the question, why therapy? So I would like both of you to give us, some examples of why you should get a therapist or consider therapy.
Okay. I'll let Felipe go. What I'm talking about.
Why not? The best answer I can give. Why not? We get dental appointments, we get medical appointments, we get gym appointments. Why not address our mind as we address our body and our soul? We go to church every Wednesday and every Sunday. Why don't we pay as much attention to our mind, which is the direct link to the soul?
Right.
But then I had to zoom all the way out. We're going through so much stress and so much things in this world. I think I always say, oh, this is the most stressful time of the entire galaxy of da-da-da. Then my dad reminds me of the civil rights era. I say, hey, you don't remember, you don't know what I went through. I say, oh, I do. Yeah, right, you're right. You win. And then, of course, then his grandparents are going to talk about, coming out of slavery and segregation and all that. We've always had tumultuous times. Right. I wonder if they got or had access to mental health therapy like we did, would we be further along this track called humanism?
Oh yeah. Me and my mom were actually discussing, the term human being, and with that, it's just like the human part is the flesh, where we are limited, but the being part is the spirit, and and the mind is attached to that, and it's just like if you don't. Just like you're saying, as we work on our physical, right, and our bodies, we do all these things, to make it look better, to make it move better, to make it be better, but what about the inside? And that's the part that always gets neglected, is because you can't see it. And it's actually more important than the outside. And so so that's the thing to me. It's just like, wow, like it's hard because we're so socialized to put these emphasis on everything outside of us and not to go inward, which is the most powerful, the most powerful part, of us. So well,
but we're also socialized to carry weight, right? To carry heavy burdens, sometimes that do not belong to us, right? It's a lot of stuff that's put on us, and I say us meaning the larger community, because of the fact that we're expected to be these people, right? We're expected to do these things. So why seek therapy? Everybody needs therapy.
Right.
Every human needs some type of therapy. And it doesn't have to be you sitting across from somebody on a couch, or even somebody sitting on your couch talking to you. It could be all kinds of different therapy, like spiritual, going to church. Sometimes spirituality is therapy for people. So it doesn't have to necessarily be talk therapy. But like what Felipe said, the mind, the body, and the spirit are connected. And when the one thing doesn't work, everything doesn't work. So, like trauma is like an emotional injury, right? And you would go to the doctor if you broke your arm. So why can't you go to the doctor if you break your mind? Like, it doesn't make sense. You know?
And that's a great point too. I was thinking about it earlier and you just brought it back to me. I heard on this documentary and they were talking about an organization, an invisible organization. They said it's the most dangerous one because you can't see it. And it's so true as we talk about trauma and different experiences or reasons why people say I have baggage. We'll come back to that about the coping methods. But when you can't see it, and you've experienced some type of emotional abuse or mental abuse or verbal abuse, those things you can't see. So a lot of times people won't do anything about it. Like they say, well, if there's no paper trail or no electronic trail, whatever, then it didn't happen. And that's the same thing. I think the approach that people take when you're experiencing something like emotional and verbal, abuse, those different things, because they can't see it. So it's like, prove it. And so that person feels like even more like shrinking, because it's just like, well, they might ask me to prove it and I can't prove it. All I can say is how it made me feel. And some people are like, don't nobody care about that. And that's, that makes it hard. That really makes it hard. But so Black Marble said, give some examples of coping methods.
What do you mean? What do they mean coping? Because everything you use. Everything you use is coping. And I'm sure, Felipe could speak to that more than I can, since he's an addiction specialist. But drinking and smoking is coping. Having a lot of sex is coping. Going to the racetrack or gambling is coping. Right? There's a lot of different ways to cope. There's negative, and there might be more positive ways to cope. But everything that you do in order to erase or to escape from whatever it is that you're feeling is a coping method.
Right.
I'm not a proponent of coping, because coping means getting along.
Oh, right? And that's what his question. Right. And that's what his question was, more in a positive way, but you're making a great point. But he was just saying that, give some examples of methods one could use if they are against therapy. And so I guess he was saying, basically saying some other options, but you make a great point when you say coping is getting along. So
It's just getting by. That's distracting yourself enough to where you don't have to deal with whatever is going on. And if you are not dealing with it, you're still in the throes of it. So what's the point of doing all of that?
Yeah.
If we, and it's like, that's one of the things that they teach us in grad school, to teach people coping skills, especially when you're doing short-term therapy, right? But if you have long-term issues, you can't teach somebody a short-term coping mechanism that's going to help them to get through whatever it is that they're doing.
Right. Or to cope for a lifetime, because it's really like they're throwing
You can't.
the life. They're not living it.
Right. You can't. You're just dealing with it. Right. And so the whole point of going to therapy is to get out of that just dealing with, or out of that just getting by, or out of that escaping from what is happening to you. Because you need to be able to get to, like I said, the core of the issue. What is the core of the issue? When you were talking about like abuse, there's differences even with the term abuse, right? The term abuse is, again, trendy. Everything is out there saying you've been abused. But if you look at it culturally, if you look at it traditionally, if you look at it with retrospect, the way that people handle discipline,
right,
you might think differently about it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because you can be, abuse is about one thing. It's about power and control. It's not about anger. It's not about how you get through it. It's not about what people do, right? But if you have been taught, this is how you discipline your children, and you parent the way that you were taught how to parent, that is not a malicious type of abuse.
Right.
When you are looking at it, right? It's this is how you learned how to discipline, but now let me teach you a different way, because that doesn't necessarily work for someone's brain or mind or development to be able to discipline them in that way.
Right. Yeah. It comes back to that question, and it will continue to come back to that question is it working for you?
Right.
It's like, it's not, if you're on the edge, and it's what we say, dysfunctional all the time and toxic, it's not working for you,
Right.
So that's an excellent point. So instead of using coping skills, I'm going to start saying wellness skills or wellness tools.
I like that.
I like that too.
I like very that positive. And it is improving it, because as everyone was popping in the chat about coping, I was just thinking, I've never thought of coping really as something positive. It is, it's very struggly. And it reminds me of, the what I always say all the time. We're so used to surviving that we are not comfortable with the idea of thriving. Right. And so that's what coping is to me, is like
surviving.
All I got to do is survive it. I just cope through it until tomorrow, or until I can get away from this person, or until I can get my bag up and I can do this and, escape. It's something negative, negative attached to it.
We're not even used to living, not even just thriving. We're used to surviving as opposed to living, right? We don't live life. We try to figure out how to get through it. And that's not living.
Exactly. Right. Fake it till you make it. So someone says, let me see here. Miss Jeannie says, the battlefield is in the mind first. Then, yes, you need to know how to be equipped, or to equip the mind to be successful. Very true. Very true. So it says yoga. So to those tools, Felipe, yoga, prayer group, community service, and all things that are tools. Okay. I love it. And I think that those resolution, something that's going to produce results is what we have to focus on, because I know that a lot of times within our community, we have conversations, we talk, we complain, we point the finger and say who did it, whose fault it is, but never really focus on the resolution piece. And even when we see on Clubhouse, a lot of times, once you start talking about resolution, you can talk about the problem in the rooms is 500, 600, 1,000 people in there talking about the problem and fighting with each other and pointing the finger. But once we start talking about what we're going to do about it, right. Who's going to help me? Like, who's going to show up? Who's going to be a part of this support group? Who's going to, hold us down? then it starts trickling, trickling, trickling. That group gets so small, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't need to be enough to discourage us from still trying, because it may have to start, it's going to have to start small, so that
Yeah.
you can find other people who are on the same track and want, to contribute in that way. So the next question is, how do you select a therapist? So we talked about all these things, what scares people and what their different, mis misconceptions are about therapy. So how do you select a therapist? Or what's the
Find the
best way?
person, find the person who works for you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if you believe in certain things, find that person who also treats people who believe in that certain thing.
No.
Right? Find the
Important.
best person who works for you. And the problem that's happening that I've seen so far is that,
Mm-hmm.
especially with Black therapists, there are very few of us.
Yeah. And
Right?
everybody want them.
And everybody wants them. Everybody that I know is booked up to next year. Like, that's
Yeah.
how badly people want therapy with Black therapists. I think
Yeah.
the problem needs to start with more Black people getting involved in school or going to grad school to
In the
learn how
field.
to be therapists so that we can get more in the field. But the
Mm-hmm.
way that you choose is based off of your ideals. What do you like? Right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to see in the therapist? Interview that person. That's what the consultation and the assessment is for. Interview
Right.
them, not in a way that from sometimes that I've seen. Well, what are your credentials? I'm not talking
Mm-hmm.
about that. I'm talking about,
Mm-hmm.
like, what do you, if I'm this person, how would you treat me? Right?
Yeah.
What techniques would you use? What things would you give me in order for me to be able to get through what it is that I need to get through? Or if you look
Okay.
at their resume or you look at their posting on whatever social media site and it says,
Mm-hmm.
I treat people with this specific thing, but you don't necessarily believe in that, why would you go to that person?
Right.
Right?
And that's so true. I mean, and I believe that you're answering the question of Miss Yana. She was just saying, how do you find them? And you're so right. That interview process, it's the same thing. Like I feel like with work, when you are he's saying his son needs something. When you work so long, when at first when you get a job, you feel like, I need this job. I need
Mhm.
them. I need them. But as you continue to work and get your experience and you build your confidence in who you are and what it is that you're bringing, and contributing to this company, that you're an asset, then you're kind of like, okay, I'm coming into this interview and y'all not just interviewing me, but I'm interviewing you. And
Right.
so I think we have to get comfortable with the idea is this needs to be a two-way street.
Absolutely.
It
Yeah.
has to be a two-way street, because there's something that you need out of it. And if you're going
Mhm.
into it and you can't get anything out of it, even the smallest thing, then it's not serving you.
Right.
It's not serving you.
One
So
thing that people need to realize is
mhm.
that therapists are not superheroes.
Mm,
They're not superhuman, right?
yeah.
We are the same type of human as you. And if you
Mhm.
go into a room, if you're at a bar and you feel the vibes from somebody, is the
Mhm.
same as if you go into that therapy room or if they come to your house and you feel bad vibes, you don't like how they, talk, or you don't like the direction in which they're going in, then
Right.
you are to say, like what I was talking about earlier, this is not the person for me. Let me go find somebody else. Right? And
Right.
this is your choice. This is your treatment. You are
Right.
not supposed to be bound to someone just because this is the way that
Right. They got a
it's supposed to
title.
go. Right.
Right.
You're supposed to
Yeah,
be able to get what you need.
it's
And if
totally
you're not
true.
getting what you need, there's no point in doing it.
Right. And that's so awesome too. Someone was speaking about, them having a lot of members, for the HBCU Lounge Network that are in North, Carolina. And then you, Rabiia, you're on the West Coast.
Yes,
And so do you see people virtually and, in person?
I do. Yes, but only in
Okay.
California, unfortunately,
And
because in order to see people other places, I have to be licensed there, and that's not an easy thing to do. So
okay.
yes, only in California.
No, yeah, and that's so true, Yana. I believe there might have been one other question here. Um, Okay. Okay. When do you do it for the right reasons? I think they're talking about, selecting a therapist. Don't switch therapists because the therapist has challenged you. to do something that you didn't want to do, can but create a barrier for your healing. And that's true. You can't, be running, you know what I mean? Like, and that's to our point earlier where we're speaking about being ready. Because if you're not ready, you're going to run, from something that is actually working and you're making some, headway. And because you don't want to be challenged, you run away from it. So you're not ready at that point. Nothing is really going to work, for you at that time. And also someone had, sent a message and they were speaking about this about, and I heard it, as well from someone close to me. When I go to a therapist, I want someone to give me the answers. Like, are they supposed to just sit there and listen? And I'm like, I think that they, feed it back to you because they listen to you. They ask you the questions. And a lot of times they're letting you what's the word? Kind of solve your own problems, which is very important because that therapist is not going to be with you 24/7. So they have to kind of set up the way. Is that correct?
Well, it's also, yes, that is true. But it's also important for you because this is your person who's helping you through your issue. If you want direction, say that's what I want. Right. I don't want you to just sit there and listen. I want you to tell me what to do. And then you have that therapist to say, well, that's not how I approach things, or that's not what I do. So maybe you should seek therapy with someone else. Right. It's necessary for you to be able to say, this is how I want it to be, because this is my therapy and this is my treatment and this is what I need. So if you're not a person that wants somebody to just listen, or you're not a person that wants somebody that talks too much, because I've had therapists like that too, to just talk about themselves. No, ma'am, that's not what I'm here for. Right. So you need to be able to say, this is not what I need. And so either you do it this way or I'm going somewhere else.
Awesome. And that's very true. And so for our last question, I want us to, if you guys can speak to, how do you find affordable therapists? Because some people may say, oh, I can't afford a therapist that's $125 an hour, $200 an hour.
I don't have an easy answer for that, because most of the therapists that I know, and just speaking from my own experiences, I'm in private practice. So this is my livelihood. This is how I get my money. Right. So I can't, if I'm only seeing 15 people a week, I can't see 15 people for $20 an hour. Like that's not going to be able to sustain my household. So some therapists do sliding scale, which often kind of works for people who are lower income. But then another thought that somebody was telling me before I even got to the private practice, but people pay for what they really need when they really need it. Right? People pay $300 for Jordans. If you could pay $300 for Jordans, you could pay $300 for therapy. This is going to help you.
That's a mindset thing, though.
It is.
Felipe,
it definitely is.
Felipe, what do you have for that? I know I have seen a couple of different affordable, I guess,
options. Here in North Carolina, we have funding for people who don't have insurance or who have inadequate insurance for mental health. There's a couple of nonprofits. My nonprofit happens to be one of them, where we offset it. We even work with people that actually have suitable income, but because they're in the helping field, we want to give them extra support so that the teachers, the nurses, the doctors, people like that. And of course, insurance. Your insurance can offset it. If you have Blue Cross Blue Shield, you might pay a $20 deposit. I mean, And with the Affordable Care Act, there's a lot of different avenues for you to get the help you need. You just have to apply, and you'd be surprised on who's qualified to receive it. People that make $40,000 and $45,000 can get cheap plans and still get adequate mental health.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. And then Tammy speaks up. She said, I'm assuming, okay, so, but do not have an opinion about experience you have not had. See for yourself, give it approximately 3 sessions. No, that's true. You got to give it a chance. But I thought she was going to go somewhere else about like employers providing like a few, like 3 sessions. Cause I know that, when you work different places, they'll have like you're part of the EAP program where they provide you a few free sessions of therapy or counseling if you need it. And I did see something where I think it was just for women though, unfortunately, but I'm sure there's something out there like that for men where you pay, it's like a membership, right? So you pay like $20 a month and then you're able to see a therapist, so a few times throughout the month, or you can pay like an annual, like it's kind of like a membership. And so I was like, okay, that could be interesting. I don't know, how good it is, but I feel like that's pretty cool. I mean, I guess if you get enough memberships, you can sustain some salaries, for a few therapists or however that works. I don't know. I guess you keep hiring more therapists if it starts, taking off, for that to be sustainable. So
there are different telehealth programs that are like that. There are different programs that are available through the county and through the state that people can apply for. Like here in California, one of the programs that I do is called trauma-informed culturally responsive therapy, which is free therapy through the county of Sacramento, offering therapy to the Black community based off of whatever trauma they may have experienced, which, like I said, all Black people have trauma, so everybody who's Black has access to it. The problem is, though, it's really short term. So if you're looking for long-term therapy, it's going to be an investment.
Yes.
Regardless.
And maybe you can start off with something, one of those free therapies, or like, those, cheaper therapy, just you can kind of get in the rhythm of it. And then you see that, okay, this is helping me. I may need a little bit more. And so now I'm willing to invest, because I know now it's working for me. I see the shift in my life. And to your point, you're going to pay for what you know you need, or you see the value in it, because you got to see the value. Because if you don't see the value in it, you're gonna be like, why would I pay that? Because you don't see the value in it. But if you see things changing in your life, you're like, I might have to do this. I might have to budget, spend less money on going out and spend more money on my mental health.
But to that point about change does not happen overnight. Change does not even happen in 2 or 3 months, right? You may not see change in 2 or 3 months. It may take you a year to 2 years before you start to see any changes in your life. So that's what I always tell people, like, baseline when you're doing therapy is 1 to 2 years before you start to actually see a difference, because you don't necessarily even, you're trying to deconstruct an entire lifetime of stuff. You can't do that in a month, right? Or 2. But speaking to that comment about the therapist, you can decide in a month or 2 if this person is good enough for you.
Definitely. No, I love it. Is this a question or a statement? Let me check it out real quick. What is it? The therapist needs to make enough money to pay for the therapist after listening to everybody's problems, or good massage therapist you get when you pay for investing yourself. Amen.
That is true.
I hear it. Well, I thank you both so much for being here today. I want to take this time for you all to tell the people how they can get in. Well, first off, the services that you provide and how they can get in contact with you.
Want to go, Felipe?
Okay. You gonna go for? Would you like to go first, Felipe?
Ladies first.
Okay.
That's right.
So like I said, I'm located in Sacramento, California. I have I work with clients that are in CPS. Well, the children in CPS custody. I have a contract with the county through them. So I do group work like domestic violence and anger management and co-parenting groups. I also do individual, like I said, individual, family, and child therapy. But my specialty is trauma recovery. So most of the things that I do are based around trauma and around recovering from trauma. But just basic relationships, couples counseling, marriage counseling, that type of thing. I do that as well. But I'm only, like I said, allowed to treat people who are in California.
Okay.
So in California, I will not be able to see you. But I know. But so he put the website up there.
And I'll add it under the video
and the Instagram. And so that's the my therapy website and my therapy Instagram page. And so if you're looking for trauma recovery in California, then I will be available for you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. And Felipe.
You can contact my agency at morethan.therapy.org. That's a nonprofit program in which we treat people, but we mainly focus on the helping professionals. If you're a regular person that needs mental health, then go through the website mindhealthy.com. We serve people in 9 or 10 different states currently as we expand to touch the world. We focus on trauma, addictions. I get a lot of CPS cases as well as, and I teach a parenting class as well as a dialectical behavioral therapy class as it relates to trauma.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I am just excited about this conversation and look forward to continuing this conversation because it needs to be normalized. Therapy needs to
Yes,
be normalized.
absolutely.
I don't even want to date anybody who doesn't do therapy because once you start doing the work, you're like, oh, wow, like these are things that, we're not typically made aware of. And you need to so that you can avoid some of these problems, or
Mm-hmm.
issues within your relationship and passing it on to your children and things like that. So you want to be on the same page as
Right.
it pertains to being in relationships with other folks. So because it takes a village, and if your village
Yes.
is kind of shaky, then it's going to be a problem. So I just thank you both so much for being here today or this evening with us. And to the audience, please give them a follow, find them, follow them, and just taking those gems that they're dropping on a frequent basis. And the next show in 2 weeks, we're going to have Rabiia back with us, and we're going to talk about sex education. And that's another topic that we need to continue to discuss. Yeah, Felipe, you can be in the comments, asking your questions. But I definitely look forward to that. And just thank you, everyone, for supporting us. And we will see you all in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you.